Tonight, a woman's husband is shot and killed, and she fears she could be next.
But everything isn't what it seems when a decades-old family secret comes to light. An all-new 2020 begins right now.
My husband is dead. I'm missing my right arm. I feel like I'm just missing my life. I don't know what to do.
Miriam gets home. It looked like the house had been ransacked.
She sees Alan laying on the kitchen floor.
He was shot right in the back of the head.
62-year-old Alan Helmick dead.
Here in this parking lot, less than 2 months before Alan was murdered, there was an earlier attempt on his life.
Somebody tried to torch our car. So the car actually got torched.
We found a vehicle that had a wick in its gas tank and had been set on fire.
You ever seen anything like that before?
We didn't know if this person could come back.
Miriam became convinced she was being watched.
She thought somebody was trying to come into the house, and she was scared for her life.
2 weeks after Alan's murder, Miriam finds a dramatic discovery under her doormat.
And she goes, "What should I do? What should I do?" And I said, "You call the police and you get away from them."
There's a card inside that says, "Alan's first, you're next. Run, run, run."
Out here in the western Colorado countryside, the wide open spaces can stretch for miles. In a place this remote, it might seem unlikely that two lonely souls might find each other and a second chance at love. But that's exactly what happened here, until one warm summer day when the peace of this place was shattered by unimaginable violence.
911, what do you have to cover your emergency?
My husband is dead.
You what?
My husband is dead.
This was a big story that shocked a small town.
There's blood everywhere. He has blood under his head.
There was a scare in the community, you know, that something like that could happen. We don't have a lot of crime here.
No. I've got to do this.
Murders just didn't really happen there, especially murders with so many twists, and especially to a well-respected businessman that everybody really loved.
Alan Helmick was a fixture in this community, a man who dedicated his life to helping others achieve their dreams, getting small businesses off the ground and families into their first homes. In fact, he was known as the broker of Main Street.
Alan Helmick was a prominent businessman. He had a mortgage business. Everybody respected him. He was firm, but he was very friendly.
An avid outdoorsman, Alan took advantage of all western Colorado had to offer.
The western slope is just gorgeous. It really is where the west meets a bit of suburbia. And in Whitewater, people have these sprawling homes, very affluent, very safe.
How would you describe this town of Grand Junction?
We pride ourselves on our outdoor activities, our beaches, our wine industry. Great for families.
Alan had grown up in the nearby town of Delta and settled into Grand Junction to raise a family. What was Alan Helmick like?
You know, he was a good guy. He was a great athlete.
Bob Cacchetti was Alan's friend and longtime accountant. Good instincts?
Yeah. Oh, he was a risk taker. He was a gambler. We went to Vegas once, and I think by the time we checked in the hotel, he was borrowing money. He recovered, you know.
He was a good business person. He took a lot of chances, but it seemed to more than not played out and worked well for him.
And definitely not one to shy away from attention.
One time we were in Mexico. A bunch of us were down there on a fishing trip, and the mariachi band come around the restaurant. Alan handed him a few dollars and asked for the trumpet from one of them, and he joined him on the trumpet. And he was really good. It was like, wow, where'd that come from?
So it didn't surprise those who knew Alan that after his first wife unexpectedly passed away, he wanted to meet new people. So he decided to try something different, dance classes. And his instructor is this woman, Miriam Giles.
Yeah, he came in one time and we were doing something and he says, yeah, I just love dancing.
Miriam was a very good dancer, a good instructor. She had me dancing, which was a miracle.
Alan, I believe, kind of had that love at first sight feeling and really wanted to pursue Miriam and did so on the dance floor.
Miriam was 10 years his junior, but Alan didn't let that discourage him. He described meeting Miriam in an interview he did shortly before he died.
She didn't want to date me, but I persisted. She was my dance instructor, so I could go on a cruise and not be club-footed. And we ended up becoming pretty compatible.
Alan seemed reborn. He was so very happy.
They ended up falling madly in love and got married within 2 years of knowing each other.
They would talk about how they would go out on their boats late at night to watch the sunsets together, have an evening cocktail, and just how they felt like they had just found a true partner late in life. It was just like a little fairy tale come true.
It's June 10th, 2008. Typical, beautiful Tuesday morning in Whitewater. And Miriam leaves to go run some errands. Alan was going to get his car serviced, and then they were going to meet up for lunch.
She stopped to get cigarettes, stuff for her horse, even check on a prescription for him.
She went to City Market to pick up his prescription and found out that he hadn't dropped it off. So she called him, could not get a hold of him.
When Miriam gets to the Chinese restaurant, she calls Alan again to see if they're gonna meet, but Alan never shows.
Miriam, after 15 minutes, decides to leave and head home. Miriam gets home. It looked like the house had been ransacked.
At that point, she sees Alan laying on the kitchen floor on his back with blood under his head. She calls 911 immediately. She's sobbing. She's frantic.
It's all bloody.
He's all bloody?
Yeah.
Where's he bleeding from?
It looks like the back of his head. It looks like somebody's been through here.
We knew patrol had been dispatched out to what was reported as a robbery, and then we had a deceased person on scene.
Robin Martin is a detective who worked the case. When the first officers arrived on the scene, they find Miriam distraught and kneeling over her husband.
Alan was on the floor in the kitchen. It looked like he had been shot in the head, and we had a bullet casing next to his body. They did a very quick security sweep to make sure there wasn't a suspect still on scene.
There's no one in the house. As they conduct their sweep, deputies notice drawers pulled out in the kitchen and a trash can tipped over in Alan's office.
In the newsroom, we have police scanners, and we heard the call go out saying there was a robbery homicide out in Whitewater. I packed up my camera gear and went out there immediately. What I saw when I got out there was a scene that was taped off. Multiple officers going in and out of the house, conducting their investigation.
A lot of media attention?
Yes.
This was a big deal in that town, I guess.
It was. Very much so. And everybody wanted to know what was going on.
My wife and I were getting ready for bed. 10 o'clock news come on. The headline was, there has been a homicide in Whitewater.
The Mesa County Sheriff's Office is called out to this Whitewater home.
I kind of jokingly said to my wife, I says, oh no, I wonder if that's Alan. And lo and behold, it was Alan.
What they find is 62-year-old Alan Helmick dead, shot in the head.
It's Detective Work 101 that you start with the people closest to the victim. But in this case, Alan's wife, Miriam, was running those errands, expecting to meet Alan for lunch. She even had the voicemails to prove it.
Okay, Alan, this isn't funny anymore. I've been sitting here in front of a Chinese place for 15 minutes, so would you call me?
Things did not add up. Everybody knew him. Everybody loved him. Who would do such a thing?
The Mesa County Sheriff's Office is called out to this Whitewater home on a report of a possible robbery. What they find is 62-year-old Alan Helmick dead, shot in the head.
After finding her husband Alan dead in a pool of blood on the floor of their Whitewater, Colorado home, Miriam Helmick is brought in for an interview with the Mesa County Sheriff's Office.
Thank you for coming down and helping us get to the bottom of this. We appreciate it. It's Miriam, right?
Investigators are trying to solve this murder. The first 24 to 48 hours are critical, and she is the first person you want to talk to.
Miriam was at our office. As we do with all, what were you doing today? Can you go through your day for us?
I had some errands I needed to run today, so we would meet later, so he got in the shower and got dressed.
Okay, what time did you leave?
About 8.
And what did she tell investigators about her whereabouts that morning?
She started listing off everywhere she had been. She told us that she was calling Alan several times, was getting his voicemail.
Hi, Alan. I just want to let you know I'm going to Walmart. If you're going to meet me for lunch, let's meet at the Chinese buffet. Love ya. Bye.
Then what happened?
I still hadn't heard from him. And then I went from there to Orchard, Mesa City Market to pick up his prescription.
Okay. What time is it now?
I probably got there about 10, around 10.
Hey, Alan. You need to turn your phone on. Question for you. When I pick up your prescription, they said that you hadn't been by yet. So are we still going to be able to meet for lunch? It's not like you to not call me, so give me a holler. Thanks. Bye.
And since he hadn't called me back, I thought he was caught up somewhere to me. So I left him a message and told him I was going home in case he decided to meet me there anyway.
Okay, Alan, this isn't funny anymore. I've been sitting here in front of a Chinese place for 15 minutes, and you're never late. So would you call me?
Miriam's entire morning is accounted for. She even offers up proof of where she's been.
I think I have all the receipts in my pocket.
She actually went from one end of the valley to the other end, and we were able to track her movements, not only by her receipts, but by her cell phone interacting with cell phone towers.
She was tested for gunshot residue?
Yes, she was tested for gunshot residue.
Her clothes were collected?
That's right.
They take those items to check them for any kind of gunshot residue or blood spatter that might indicate Miriam had something to do with this. And those results came back negative.
She's also caught on several surveillance cameras throughout the morning. Miriam seemingly has an airtight alibi. So naturally, investigators are anxious to ask her who she thinks may have wanted to harm Alan.
Did he have any enemies, any problems with any of his contracting work going on, any disputes? Would he share that with you if he did?
I think so. He shared a lot with me.
Miriam said Alan was generally well-liked, but detectives also knew he'd been a local mortgage broker. Could he have turned someone down? Maybe had a disgruntled former client or co-worker who was out for revenge.
He did not like lying or dishonesty. He would fire people for that, but that was respected.
And he had started his own business here decades earlier. Alan had married his high school sweetheart, Sharon, and had 4 children through 37 years together. But on New Year's Eve, 2003, she died of a sudden heart attack. How did that affect him?
Friends said that he was quite depressed and wasn't doing that well.
And soon afterward, he takes up dancing.
He was encouraged to try a new activity.
When Alan met Miriam, I know she had a policy of not dating her students, but Alan was pretty relentless.
Kieran Wilson was a local journalist in Grand Junction, Colorado, who covered this case. Just days after Alan's murder, she spoke to an emotional Miriam.
I met him teaching how to dance, and I didn't really like him while he grew on me. But he was such a gentleman, and he was so sweet, and just love him to death, you know.
Miriam had been dealt her own difficult hand in life, having faced not one but 2 unimaginable tragedies back in her home state of Florida. Chris Giles is Miriam's son. Grew up in Jacksonville, mom, dad, a sister. What was it like?
It was good. Typical kind of four family. You know, me and my sister were super close. Mom kind of let us to do our things, but it was also there to kind of shepherd everything and help us through.
In 2000, Miriam and her first husband, Jack, were devastated when their eldest child, 23-year-old daughter Amy, died suddenly after an accidental overdose. How did the family cope with this, with her death?
We didn't really talk about it. After a while, things kind of started going downhill.
And Jack just, he kind of, he just could not live without his daughter. They just tore him apart.
And then 2 years after your sister dies, tragedy strikes again.
Yeah. My dad took his own life, and I woke up to the gunshot.
Miriam's husband, Jack, shot himself while he and Miriam were in bed.
Mom kind of runs out the door, and she's hysterical. Just losing her mind. Like a scream I've never heard before in my entire life.
That was a dramatic change in your family. Yeah. The loss of father.
Yeah, and you're trying to figure out how to deal with those things. You got to deal with the pain. You got to deal with the hurt. You know.
She turned to dancing after all this.
Yeah, it was kind of her escape, where she kind of felt normal.
And then your mom decides to move to Colorado.
Yes.
And not long after is when Alan Helmick walked through the door of the dance studio where Miriam worked.
Everybody's really happy for Alan. He seemed real happy. Yeah, another chance at love.
Everybody said that her and Alan were kind of a good team for dancing. They were a real couple.
So Alan and Miriam decided to build a house together, and they chose the community of Whitewater. The house was set pretty far back from the road, and it was about a 40-acre property.
Your mom goes through all this, seemingly happy again, and all of a sudden, this happens.
911, what do you have to have your emergency?
My husband is dead.
How did you learn that Alan had died?
She called me. Called me and told me that he'd been shot. Still kind of another shock to the system.
Another loss.
Yeah, another loss.
So far, investigators don't seem to have much to go on. But about an hour into that police interview, Miriam says something that would raise the eyebrows of any homicide detective.
In Delta. And somebody tried to torch our car.
So the car actually got torched in Delta?
Had Alan's killer made an earlier attempt on his life? After Alan Helmick is found murdered in his Whitewater, Colorado home, his wife Miriam is interviewed by investigators. And she tells them about a shocking incident that happened just 6 weeks earlier.
Somebody tried to torch our car. They took a stick or a big like restaurant skewer and put some kind of gauze on it and stuck it down in the gas tank and lit it.
Here in this parking lot, less than 2 months before he was murdered, there was an earlier attempt on Alan's life. Someone tried to set his car on fire. It looked like something straight out of a movie, but for the Helmicks, this brush with death was all too real.
Tell me about that incident. What happened that day with the car?
Well, Alan and Miriam had driven to Delta for the closing on their business. They were selling Alan's title company to a purchaser, and they had finished the transaction and had parked out front.
Collected a check?
And collected a check for over $100,000 for the sale of this business, and got in the car.
At that point, Miriam went in to use the restroom.
And while she's in the business, the car starts smoking.
Alan looked in the mirror and saw that the vehicle was on fire. He got out of the vehicle, went to the back of the car, and a wick was in the gas tank.
When Miriam comes out, she hears that Alan's screaming at her to bring her to get a fire extinguisher, that the car is on fire.
Upon arrival, we found a vehicle that had a wick in its gas tank and had been set on fire.
You ever seen anything like that before?
No, I had not seen anything like that.
It was pretty obvious someone had tried to start that fire.
Correct.
So if someone was trying to set the car on fire, it didn't quite work.
Correct. The fumes did not ignite, fortunately.
Were they able to glean anything else from the crime scene?
No security cameras from the surrounding businesses, no video footage whatsoever of what had transpired.
The police both questioned Miriam and Alan after the car incident.
You have no idea who would do this to you or Alan?
No, not at all. I mean, it's just weird. I don't know. We've been hashing it over last night. We can't figure it out.
Alan didn't have a lot of enemies, and so who would want to kill Alan in that kind of way by blowing up his car? That was a real mystery.
Do you know anyone that would have a problem with you?
I do not. Over the years, as active as I was in business in this area, there's going to be some unhappy people because I turn people down on loans from time to time. But I think I was well respected in the savings and loan industry. There are two people that have had a problem with it.
Okay, who are those two people?
Alan mentions two bankers with whom he had prior dealings, but quickly downplays their potential involvement in the arson.
I can't imagine them being vindictive because they're too much exposed.
Right.
They did stupid things, but they're not stupid people.
Investigators will ultimately determine that those bankers are not involved, but they're exploring every avenue, even asking Alan if he thinks it's possible Miriam could have been responsible for the car fire.
Oh, God. No, I don't think that.
Not at all.
That would be terrible. No, why would you do that?
So during the interviews with officers, Alan and Miriam had mentioned that Miriam would not hurt Alan or harm him because Alan was worth more to her alive than if he were dead.
What would she gain if you died yesterday?
What he would get is a mess. She gets nothing that was created prior to the marriage.
Alan was convinced that it wasn't Miriam, and if the investigators in Delta had any suspicions of Miriam being involved in this, Alan was the first to defend her and say she wouldn't do this.
And besides, what reason would Miriam have for trying to kill Alan? He'd always gone out of his way to make her dreams come true with lavish gifts and gestures.
His goal in life was to make me happy, and he took care of me. His favorite saying was, have fun like hell. So anytime he knew I was going shopping or he gave me money or anything like that, he would say, have fun like hell.
Alan loved Miriam, and he was always happy to dote on her, buying her lavish gifts like her own dance studio and even a horse training business, always intent on making her lifelong dreams a reality.
I met Alan and Miriam Helmick at my farm because they wanted to buy some horses to start a horse breeding operation. It was always her passion to start riding, and Alan was just said, I'm going to give this dream to you.
Horse training centers, it's extremely difficult way to make a living. Most of those never pay off. It's a labor of love.
You told him it was not a good idea to invest in this horse. No, and I said, it's a good hobby, but it's too expensive.
And his desire to open up that dance studio came from where?
Oh, it had to be Miriam.
You had your concerns about him investing in these things.
Oh, I told him, I said, hey, get your head up your ass.
Sounds like you really wanted to make Miriam happy.
I think so.
Alan was always very good with his finances, but with the horse business and the dance business, they were hemorrhaging money.
As investigators began digging into Alan's finances, they found that bad business decisions had left him in a serious financial hole. But were his money troubles enough of a reason for someone to want him dead? Or could the murder have been more personal?
Does Alan Jr. know where you guys live now?
Yes, he's been there.
He's my wayward kid because he's sort of a bum.
Investigators will soon learn about some long-standing Helmick family tension.
He said if he shows up when he's not announced, you call the cops.
One week after his untimely death, Alan Helmick is laid to rest.
When we were at Alan's funeral, Miriam sat in a pew in the very front, of course. She was crying, looked real despondent. Alan's family, his daughters, were just heartbroken and devastated. Alan was a really good dad to those kids. He was like their rock, and hit them real hard.
What's it like around here without him, I guess?
Very quiet. I'm missing my right arm. I feel like I'm just missing my life. I don't know what to do.
In the days after Alan Helmick's murder, investigators had diligently chased down leads and conducted interviews with people in his orbit, but they hadn't announced any suspects. There was, however, one thing they were pretty sure of. This was not a robbery gone wrong.
What stood out to you?
It was odd. You had property still in the house that was, you could assume, was of value that a normal burglar would take.
Like what?
Computers, phones, jewelry. The normal type of stuff you would expect somebody to steal.
There were drawers pulled out evenly. There was a trash can knocked over. There were drawers that were open that wouldn't hold valuables anyway.
And most of the drawers were open in the kitchen, right?
Correct. In the kitchen, throughout the house. It just did not sit right. It did not feel right. It was looking staged.
And Alan's autopsy confirmed that he probably had not walked in on anyone committing a burglary.
There was no indication that Alan had tried to fight off his attacker. It was very clear that he was caught by surprise as he was shot right in the back of the head.
Do you think Alan knew his attacker?
I don't know.
But there was someone in Alan's life that Miriam had told investigators he'd been wary of. At one point, Miriam starts pointing fingers at Alan's son, Alan Jr. What did she say about him?
Miriam talked about how Alan and Alan Jr. never got along, and that there was some falling out between the two of them and some animosity.
Tell me more about Alan Jr.
He's had he's had run-ins with the law.
What was the relationship between Alan and Alan Jr. 3 to 4 months ago?
Same.
Same
It's been
distance?
that way for many years.
Okay, kind of
Very
stay apart.
distant.
Okay.
There's some real animosity there.
Does Alan Jr. know where you guys live now?
Yes, he's been there.
And after that car fire 6 weeks earlier, Alan had also mentioned his strained relationship with his son to those investigators.
He's my wayward kid because he's sort of a bum. And you can't fix that by just handing him money.
Alan's personal issues with his son, coupled with the fact that he may have known his attacker, was enough for detectives to bring Alan Jr. in for an interview.
Come on in and have a seat. And
Right here?
yes, that's fine.
He's the kind of guy that if he saw something that wasn't right, he would give you his 2 cents about it, and it would not be nice. It would be sharp.
He just told it as it is.
Yeah, it's sharp. Yeah, right out.
Sure.
My dad's like, you're out, you know,
Right.
you're I like you because you're doing this.
Alan Jr. goes on to say that his father had effectively cut him off financially.
You know, Dad wouldn't give me a dime.
Okay. Did you ask?
No, I'm sure that I had back then, and then he repeated, you know, hey, this is something you need to learn to take care of yourself.
When asked, Alan Jr. insists he would never hurt his father, and he had an alibi. He was working out of state at the time of the murder.
Where were you Tuesday? Because everybody's been asked that question. And
you know, I'm not an ignorant human being.
Right.
And I would be offended if you didn't ask those questions. In fact, I would be angry with you if you didn't ask them in that way. Would have been working on the computers. I would have been at the hostel on my computer.
In Seattle.
Alan Jr. was cleared as a suspect.
That's right. No evidence linking Alan Jr. to having anything to do with Alan's murder.
So investigators are back to square one.
That's right.
There were no suspects. We didn't know if this person could come back.
I never thought it would happen here or anything like that would ever happen here. It's just always quiet around here.
Are you scared that this person might come back?
I don't know. Yes and no. I don't want to leave because I'm closer to him here.
Had there been a murder in my home, would not want to stay there, especially not a few days after. But she said it was her home. She said she felt closer to him there.
But if Miriam says she felt safe enough to stay in her and Alan's home, that was about to change.
And then 2 weeks after Alan's murder, Miriam finds a dramatic discovery under her doormat at the house.
And she goes, what should I do? What should I do? And I said, you get off the phone and you call the police and you get away from there.
Was the killer now coming after Miriam?
Miriam Helmick came home last Tuesday to find her husband Alan shot and killed. Her quiet Whitewater neighborhood was turned upside down.
The baffling murder of businessman Alan Helmick had left a community desperate for answers. Detectives were taking a close look at everyone in Alan's life, even close friends like Ed Benson, who was brought in for an interview.
I've known Alan, I don't know, a long time.
So you're good friends, well, is it safe to say you're good friends, or?
We're friends,
okay.
We're not, we're good friends.
So.
Strange interviews with the sheriff's department, the investigator. You know, you go in and we're friends, but yet we were treated as like suspects.
Did you guys ever have any bad blood between you two or anything like that?
Not from my standpoint, not at all, no.
Any enemies that you know of without Alan telling you, or any, said rumors that, Alan's not a good guy or anything like that?
Never.
Okay.
Never.
And there was that mysterious car fire just weeks earlier. Everyone wondering, could the two incidents be linked?
Think at all that they may be connected?
A good possibility. I was letting them figure that out. It was, it was a shock to us. But he never mentioned anything about anybody that would do something like that.
As days passed with no suspects in custody, Miriam became convinced she was being watched. She reported seeing a white pickup truck with a driver she didn't recognize circling the property, leaving her to wonder whether the same people who killed Alan were now coming after her.
I talked to Miriam almost on a daily basis, and in a lot of our conversations, she talked about that she thought somebody was trying to come into the house and she was scared for her life.
Miriam starts reporting that weird things have been happening around the house. She's saying that she will come home and a door that she knows she locked is unlocked.
She was finding lights on. She was finding medicine cabinet doors open that shouldn't be.
She saw one or more suspicious vehicles that she didn't know who was linked to them. And mind you, this is a very small area, only a handful of homes out there. And you recognize most of the vehicles that are driving in and out of the area.
But the strange happenings at the home weren't the only thing worrying Miriam. With Alan, the sole breadwinner, gone, there wasn't any money coming in. During her police interview, Miriam had explained to investigators that they had a prenup.
She really didn't have anything without him. She didn't stand to gain a lot.
I did not have any legal claim to anything that he owned.
Okay.
It was pretty cut and dry.
Miriam's financial situation was fairly dire. In fact, she started selling off some of the property they had together.
She said she had no money. All the money was in Alan's name. So I said, well, let me buy the horses back. I'll pay your debt off to the other trainer. That way it'll give you some money for what you need to live on.
And then, as Miriam is struggling to stay financially afloat, an ominous message shows up on her doorstep.
She was with her friend Penny. They had just gotten back from shopping. She goes up to her front door and she sees an envelope sticking out from under the mat. And when she opens that envelope, there's a card inside that says, "Alan's first, you're next. Run, run, run."
She collapses to the ground, becomes very distraught.
Marion calls me and she's frantic. And she goes, "What should I do?" And I said, "Well, you need to hang up the phone and call the police and get out of there." I said, because somebody could be there trying to hurt you.
The greeting card is turned over by Miriam to her lawyer, who then notifies the police.
I was given a copy of the card. It said, "To the grieving widow," in block letters. On the front is a picture of a middle-aged female. And it said, "Insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result." And then inside, Alan spelled A-L-L-E-N.
Misspelled.
Misspelled. Your was also Y-O-U-R. A grammatical thing, okay.
Whoever left it there had cut out the barcode, seemingly in an effort to obfuscate anybody tracing that card, where it was purchased, who purchased it, that sort of thing.
It looks like Miriam might be the next target.
Maybe there is somebody out there who really wants to kill Miriam as well.
After Miriam received the threatening card, she left and she went back to Florida, Jacksonville, Florida, where she's from. She moved in with her son, Chris.
How was she coping?
Oh, it was not good. You know, there was some brokenness there. I just knew that she was in a bad place. I was trying to help her through that stuff.
What did you make of that?
I think that's not that abnormal. She didn't have a lot to her name, so she needed to figure out how to live without Alan.
Back in Colorado, that bizarre greeting card gives police something they have been desperately searching for: a solid lead.
I had actually seen this card before.
Just coincidentally, you had seen the card?
It's kind of a unique front on a card.
It's at this city market that investigators finally get the break they've been waiting for. The person who bought that card with the threatening message from Miriam is caught on surveillance tape here. And just who that person is will take everyone by surprise.
You see it clear as day.
Then a bombshell discovery from decades earlier.
The piece of evidence that was really the smoking gun, almost literally, was recovered from that lawn in Delta.
What investigators find buried here will crack this case wide open.
What we had was a man who had led a good life and he ended up murdered.
I saw Alan on the floor. He was cold and gray.
People were in disbelief. People were scared.
I held his hand for a few minutes and tried to make some sense of it all.
Miriam comes home. There's a handwritten note, and it says, "To the grieving widow,
Alan's first, you're next. Run, run, run."
It looks like Miriam might be the next target.
The killer was now after her.
You want twists and turns? There's no shortage of that here.
I met Miriam on a dating site. She wrote, "Saw your profile and loved it."
She was moving on.
Even my girls were like, she's dating already?
She's trying to get on with her life in a new state. But another incident with a gun comes to the surface.
I heard the shot. Mom kind of runs out the door and she's hysterical, just screaming. Like a scream I've never heard before in my entire life.
Could what they find buried in this yard be the smoking gun?
On June 10, 2008, 62-year-old respected businessman Alan Helmick was found dead in his home by his wife Miriam.
When we arrived, Alan was on the floor in the kitchen. He had been shot in the head, and we had a bullet casing next to his body.
The place had been ransacked, but nothing seemed to have been taken.
They realized fairly quickly that this was a staged attempt to hide what really happened.
A tragic ending to what appeared to be a perfect second chance at love.
Both Alan and Miriam were widows. She was his dance instructor for ballroom dancing lessons.
I'm missing my right arm. I feel like I'm just missing my life. I don't know what to do.
Miriam told police she'd been running errands all morning and provided receipts to back up her alibi.
I went to Walmart. Okay. I needed to buy some shirts.
Police were at a loss as to who would want this well-liked businessman dead.
Alan had some enemies, but nobody was going to kill him.
And as investigators began to dig deeper, the story took a frightening turn.
Miriam comes home. There's a handwritten note, and it says, "To the grieving widow. Alan was first, you're next. Run, run, run."
It looks like Miriam might be the next target.
The real killer was now after her.
After Miriam received the threatening card, she went back to Florida, where she's from.
When Miriam came back to Florida, I was so surprised. I just couldn't believe it. She gave me a call, and I got a lot to tell you, she says.
In Florida, Miriam turned to old friends for support, reconnecting with her former neighbor, Aline Lee.
Miriam didn't have any money, she said. All I've got is just the clothes on my back. I have nothing. I said, I can get you clothes. My girls are your size. I bought a gas card for her, and I gave her a bag of jewelry. I just felt bad for her.
While Miriam tries to restart her life in Florida, detectives in Colorado are continuing to work the case, trying to figure out where that threatening card she received came from.
They got in touch with the manufacturer of the card. He was able to tell them where these cards were sold.
I checked the Hallmark. I checked the Hobby Lobby. We finally get to the city markets. I contacted their loss prevention guy. They found 2 sales. One person paid in cash, didn't know who that person was. The other one was with a credit card. So we had a name, and then he found one more purchase. He called me, and he's like, I've got video.
That store uses VHS tapes?
That particular store was not as up-to-date as their others, and they did use VHS, and they used it over and over and over again. So by the time we got this tape, it was kind of delicate. It was her. She was wearing the same style of shirt that she had walked in with her interview. It was just a different color combination.
You see Miriam going first to the area where the cards are sold within the city market, and then to the cash register where she pays for it. Clear as day.
So now it appears that Miriam, the grieving widow, seemingly afraid for her own life, had actually sent that threatening card to herself. But when investigators confront her about this, she says she has an explanation.
What Miriam told them is that she felt like the police weren't paying enough attention to the case. They weren't doing much. And so she wanted to kind of jog that with this card.
That was probably not the best decision to be made. Not what I kind of would have done in the situation.
She felt she needed to do this.
She felt she needed to.
Did that greeting card incident change the way you and investigators approached the case?
What innocent person would do this, obfuscate, complicate a murder investigation with this ruse?
But remember, when she was interviewed by investigators, Miriam said she had very little to gain from Alan's death.
We did a prenup. Okay. Everything his is his. Everything mine is mine. He has more than I do.
Okay.
With no clear motive in sight, the Mesa County Sheriff's Office turned their attention to Miriam's past, learning about that double tragedy she and her family suffered years earlier in Florida.
There was the sudden loss of her daughter, and then a shocking development with her first husband.
While Miriam and her first husband, Jack, were in bed, Jack shot himself in the head. Now you say, okay, she's had not one, but two husbands shot in the head.
Was there a common thread?
And they were both married to Miriam Helmick.
Police ruled it a suicide. There were some strange circumstances, though. Things like he used his right hand to pull the trigger. Jack was a lefty.
Investigators then start looking back at your father's death.
Yes. I woke up to the gunshot.
You were just down the hall.
I was sleeping on the couch in the family room, and I heard the shot. Mom kind of runs out the door, and she's hysterical, just screaming. Like a scream I've never heard before in my entire life. There's certain things in life that can't be faked.
Did you question her?
No. I know one of the things came up is that my dad was left-handed. Well, my dad learned how to write left-handed because he had a cast on his arm when he was younger, so he was ambidextrous. He could use his right hand too.
And you had seen him depressed before this?
Yeah.
Was the death of her first husband, that case, ever reopened?
No, it was ruled a suicide.
But with clouds of suspicion gathering over Miriam about the death of her second husband, she does something unexpected.
I met Miriam on a dating site.
A millionaire match?
A millionaire match.
Your profile described me to a T.
Investigators are starting to wonder if they could actually have a black widow on their hand.
I mean, she was finding the husband, she was looking for the money, and then moving on.
With suspicion now mounting that she may be the person who killed her husband, Alan, Miriam Helmick does something unexpected. She goes looking for love again.
Miriam took me to this website for dating men that had a lot of money. I mean, we're talking about very rich. And she picked out this one guy from Orlando. Had a lot in common with her. He liked to dance, and he loved horses, all this stuff.
I met Miriam on a dating site. I owned a dance studio for about 6 or 7 years, and then I had a human resources company for about 20 years. I did very well for myself. Miriam had contacted me first. She wrote, "Saw your profile and loved it. I can dance, any dance, and I'm pretty good at it. Your profile requirement described me complete to a T."
She says, "I'm going to go down there." I said, "You're what?" I mean, this is just months after Alan had died. Even my girls were like, "God, she's dating already?" And I said, "Yeah."
We met at TGI Fridays. She was very talkative, very nice. We hit it off really good, actually.
Miriam even opens up about the recent loss of her husband.
Miriam had told me that her husband had died of some brain disease. She said that we both felt he was going to die soon anyway, and there was no big deal. We were just waiting for the time. She handled his death very well. I just thought to myself, okay, well, big deal.
Miriam may have been trying to move on and put Alan's death behind her, but back in Colorado, investigators are taking a closer look at her, starting with her alibi from the day of Alan's murder.
Went to Orchard Mesa Market. I went to Walmart. I think I have all the receipts in my pocket.
She was able to pull out the receipts from her pocket of everywhere she had been that morning. Just didn't seem natural to us.
To show up at the police interview with a pocket full of receipts, suspicious or just thorough?
I would say very odd. That is not a normal thing.
Is that really your first thought, to explain where you had gone in great detail and keeping the receipts?
What did investigators make of her alibi?
Well, they thought it was suspicious, didn't make a lot of sense to them.
And investigators weren't the only ones with suspicions about Miriam.
Miriam Helmick, Helmick.
Remember that local reporter who sat down with her after Alan's murder? She couldn't shake the feeling that something was off with her story.
Have you planned the funeral yet?
Oh, it's tomorrow at 10.
I start to get a weird feeling as she's talking.
I wanted to get back into dressage and decided I should have a dressage horse, so he bought several.
It was all about her. And these interviews are really supposed to be about the deceased.
His goal in life was to make me happy. He never wanted me to worry about anything or have any problems or anything, and he took care of me, everything.
As I was speaking with her, it went from feeling really bad for her to being suspicious.
Are you scared that this person might come back?
That was it.
Yes,
that's
no.
the look.
I don't want to leave because I'm closer to him here.
She started looking to the side. It's just like when you're talking to somebody and you know that they're lying because of nonverbal cues that they have. When I left that house, I've never scurried away from a place so quickly in my life. I was genuinely scared.
And while Miriam is talking to the media, investigators are talking to those closest to Alan.
You continue with the investigation. Actually, you interview Alan's children.
Yes. Right after Alan passed, we were speaking to the daughters, and they had expressed concerns of an inability to get a hold of their dad.
He's been completely out of character, drastically since January. It's odd for my dad.
You've seen him change. You've seen him change his character.
And maybe not so much see him change his character, but through her, I can't even get to him.
He wasn't answering phone calls. He wasn't returning voicemails.
Hi, Dad. It's Portia. I hate to bother you so much. I haven't been able to talk to you, so things are piling up.
Hey, Miriam. This is Christy. I've been calling my dad for about a week, and I'm not hearing back.
And every time I called, Miriam answered. Before then.
His phone?
Yeah.
Okay.
His cell phone. Which I thought was weird. He always answered his phone.
It appeared that he was being distanced from them.
I'm like, well, Dad, is your home phone hooked up? He's like, no. I'm like, well, how does anybody get a hold of you? Well, Miriam doesn't want anybody to bother me.
And when they would call Miriam, there was excuses as to, oh, I'll have him call you back, or he's not around.
She certainly, in the days leading up to his murder, was isolating him from his children.
Alan's kids couldn't help but wonder why Miriam seemed to be keeping them from their father in the months leading up to his murder. Could it have been something to do with a sudden decline in his health?
Father's never sick. My father's like an ox. And he was, every time I would talk to him, he was sick.
And did he say what he was sick from?
He didn't know. I don't think he had a clue.
But he said he couldn't even stand up. He was so dizzy.
The more investigators dig, the more troubling details they uncover, like a gun that seemed to have disappeared from Miriam and Alan's home.
One of Alan's children said she specifically remembered seeing a .25 caliber pistol in his sock drawer.
They couldn't find that gun after the murder.
Police learned of a shooting incident that had happened outside this house decades before. Could what they find buried in this yard be the break they need? Detectives will often say that when it comes to investigating, there are no coincidences. And for those working the murder of Alan Helmick, they were certain that attempted car fire just weeks earlier was somehow connected to their case.
This area is where I was dispatched to a car fire. We saw that somebody had placed a wick in the gas tank of a vehicle. We contacted the driver. We were speaking with him. We were speaking with his wife. As I started questioning both of them, I noticed she became a bit nervous, and she said that she wasn't feeling well, needed to run to the restroom. I watched her leave the back of the vehicle, not go into the restroom she just came out of.
Not right here.
Not right here where she just went to the restroom. She actually went across 4 lanes of traffic, which...
That's strange.
Very strange.
Did she ever come back?
Not while I was on scene.
She stayed over there?
She stayed over there.
When you were still here, you went into the ladies' room.
We did.
What did you find there?
We smelled the odor of gasoline. It was fairly strong.
Since investigators learned that Miriam had been standing at the trunk right before Alan discovered the fire, they decided to bluff him, telling Alan there was surveillance video of the incident to see if he thought his wife could have been responsible.
I watched the video.
Is she on there?
I'm asking you. What do you think?
No, is she on there?
I'm
Did she
asking
lie?
you what you think.
No, but I could be wrong.
We bluffed Alan, and he said he didn't believe it.
And you didn't answer my question. You looked at the video.
Yeah.
Nice little flick there. If you'd seen her on the video doing it, I would have been shocked.
The crime scene reminded investigators of a movie scene.
After all the dust had settled, our investigators started thinking about what had transpired in Delta. They thought, this sounds like the car explosion scene in No Country for Old Men, which had just come out in the last year. And it was a popular movie where the villain had created a distraction by lighting a magazine, sticking it into the gas inlet, and exploding the car.
As police are looking into this, they discovered that the Helmicks had rented that movie about 4 days prior to the incident.
Was this the smoking gun or smoking car?
It definitely was part of the investigation. Miriam was not charged with the arson in Delta because of the roadblock put up when Alan demanded the investigation be closed. He did not want to pursue it if we were looking at Miriam, and that he would not cooperate with the investigation.
And the detectives now investigating Alan's murder are still searching for any hard evidence that Miriam pulled the trigger. After all, they still hadn't recovered a murder weapon.
There was the issue of the firearm that was missing from the home. And in talking to the daughters, we knew that there should have been a .25 caliber Lorsen in the house.
Because people had seen that gun there before.
Correct.
As luck would have it, there was an old Helmick family story from decades earlier of Alan's first wife's stepfather firing that same gun into the ground during a domestic dispute back in 1989. Could this gun, now missing, be the murder weapon?
There was some evidence that it had been in the house in the years leading up to the murder, and no evidence of what he would have done with that weapon. No evidence he sold it, gave it away, traded it. You know, where is this gun?
And then investigators bring in a metal detector into the case.
Right.
Detectives come up with a long shot idea. Go back to the property where that domestic dispute happened back in 1989. Could they recover the bullet fired from that gun and compare it to the bullet that killed Alan?
I received a phone call from the chief investigator at the Sheriff's Department of Mesa County asking me if I would assist them in searching for a bullet.
Carol Quarles is a retired law enforcement officer who has experience using a metal detector to search for missing evidence.
So your reaction when they asked you to get involved in this case?
Oh, yeah, heck yeah. Anytime. Just call me. I love finding evidence.
And you started over here?
And I started working my way around. And then I just slowly worked my way around to about midway in the yard. And I hadn't found anything.
And they were getting nervous. The investigator said, well, maybe you're not going to find it.
Yeah, maybe the witness wasn't remembering things right.
Right. To which you said,
let me check over there in case the shooter shot into that corner of the yard. And so I walked over there, and it wasn't 30 to 45 seconds and I had the bullet.
Where did you find that bullet?
That bullet was right in this area right here. It was an aha moment. I mean, it was euphoric. That's the best way that I can explain it.
And they dug up that bullet that had been there since 1989. They were able to compare that bullet from the ground to the bullet that was recovered from Alan's headshot. And what we were able to determine was that the two bullets were consistent with each other.
The evidence is building up against her.
It is.
At this point, police believe that they have enough to arrest Miriam for Alan's murder.
But this is a woman who police believe orchestrated an attempted firebombing and shot her husband in the head in cold blood. Is she just going to go quietly?
She's being investigated for a homicide. You don't ever know that she doesn't have a gun. If she sees you and she's scared, knows what's going on, it's a real game out there at that point.
In the fall of 2008, just a few months after Alan Helmick's murder, Miriam was living in Jacksonville, Florida, attempting to move on with her life. But her past in Colorado was about to catch up with her.
I was a special agent with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement here in the Jacksonville field office. I got a call from Mesa County Sheriff's detectives, and they were investigating a homicide in Colorado.
Did you have an inkling that she might be a suspect?
It wasn't kind of until I was driving home one day and the Grand Junction police called me and said, is she living? I was like, yeah, she's with me. I don't know what's going on, but she's there.
And we sent 2 investigators down there with an arrest warrant.
They handcuffed her and set her right on the ground. She had a blank expression on her face, like a little bit angry looking almost.
6 months after Alan's death, Miriam is charged with first-degree murder, attempted murder for that car fire, and forgery. She pleads not guilty and is extradited from Florida back to Colorado.
What we had was a man who had led a good life and he ended up murdered, and there's a need to bring to justice the right person.
A year after being arrested and charged, Miriam Helmick goes on trial here at the Mesa County Courthouse. Prosecutors argue that the grieving widow is actually a cold-blooded killer.
Miriam Helmick standing trial for the murder of her husband was a huge deal. The courtroom was pretty packed. It was a bit chilling. Miriam did not show a lot of emotion. She didn't look like herself.
So why do prosecutors believe Miriam killed Alan? They argue the motive was as age-old as they come. Money. Financial motive was the critical part of your argument.
There were suspicious bank account activity where it appeared that Miriam had forged multiple checks from Alan's account. All told, she had taken about $40,000 out of his account through writing those checks.
But the defense pushed back, saying that Miriam had Alan's permission to write those checks, both as his wife and his secretary.
Banks had been calling, trying to get a hold of Alan.
He wasn't being available to his banker, something that had never happened before.
Now there was an urgency.
Right. In fact, the banker had reached out to one of Alan's daughters, and that was tension that was building.
Prosecutors put Alan's daughter, Portia, on the stand to testify about the way Miriam seemed to be isolating her father in the months leading up to his murder.
He was much less involved in my life. He was much more distant. Well, I called him, and when I didn't get to his phone, I called Miriam's phone.
And when they would call Miriam, there was excuses as to, oh, I'll have him call you back, or he's not around.
If Alan was discovering that she had been taking money from him without permission, that was a possible motive.
How would he have reacted if he had found it?
Everything would have been over. You had had our attorney on a hotline, and it would have been over.
And prosecutors argued that Miriam had tried to kill Alan not once, but twice. The first time in that failed attempt at blowing up his car. They called Miriam's horse breeder and friend, Jerry Yarborough, to the stand.
When I went on the stand, I was super scared because I knew my testimony was going to be not so good for Miriam.
Jerry told jurors about a conversation she said she had with Miriam after that failed car bombing.
She had said that she found out that a car won't explode if it has a full tank of gas.
And when she said that, what was her demeanor?
She laughed.
That catch you off guard?
Pretty much.
But the defense pointed out that if Miriam was after Alan's money, why would she try to blow up his car while he was holding that large cashier's check he had just received?
The piece of evidence that was really the smoking gun, almost literally, was the bullet that was able to be recovered from that lawn in Delta.
How pivotal was that in tying Miriam to the crime?
That was a nice piece of evidence because we didn't actually find the gun, but we had a story about the gun, how it was seen in the home. Now we have a bullet that roughly matches the bullet that was recovered from Alan.
But as Miriam's defense pointed out, roughly matched is not the same as a perfect match.
Couldn't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt.
Then the defense did something you don't often see at a murder trial.
Defense calls Miriam Helmick to the stand.
They called Miriam to testify in her own defense.
Once you got inside, what did you see?
I saw Alan on the floor. I dropped my bags and went to him. He was cold and gray. I held his hand for a few minutes and tried to make some sense of it all.
Miriam stayed on that stand for 2 days, denying that she had anything to do with Alan's murder. When prosecutors got their chance to cross-examine her, they pressed her on the infamous run, run, run card that she admitted sending to herself.
You were just acting at that time, weren't you?
Yes, just briefly.
You concocted a complete ruse to lead them on a wild goose chase away from you and towards some phantom killer out there, correct?
If they'd actually had contacted me or listened, then maybe I wouldn't have been at that point.
That was probably not the best decision to make, but I think at that point she was probably broken, just emotionally and mentally broken.
That video really did undermine Miriam's credibility.
Showing her purchasing that card was very difficult for the defense to rebut.
After 16 days of testimony, the jury gets the case.
They come back with a verdict in 5 hours for a first-degree murder case. You just don't see that.
5 hours was very fast.
The verdict, guilty
on all counts.
There was a little bit of a sigh of relief.
You thought, good, she's going to get what she has coming.
She was sentenced to life without parole. I think that spoke volumes to all of the evidence, circumstantial or not, that was stacked up against her.
But Miriam says the jury got it wrong, and she had a lot more to say when we spoke in her first interview since being convicted. Miriam, are you telling me that your husband Alan started the car fire himself? Why would he do that? It's now been 15 years since Miriam Helmick was sentenced to life for killing her husband, Alan. Since then, she's been at the Denver Women's Correctional Facility, where she recently called me from.
An incarcerated individual at Denver Women's Correctional Facility.
Hello, Miriam.
Hi.
How are you doing over there?
Good, good.
This is the first time she's spoken publicly since her 2009 sentencing. I asked Miriam about first meeting Alan back when she was his dance instructor in Grand Junction.
And was it love at first sight?
Well, not really, no, because I was there trying to work, and but he just never gave up. Let's just put it that way.
He was very persistent.
Yes, very.
And eventually you fell in love with him.
Yes. It was kind of hard not to. I mean, he's a very, very kind, very sweet man, and he always had your best interest at heart, usually.
Alan's kids say that you were isolating him from them in the months prior to his death. Was that true?
No. But he would get really pale during the day, and I would make him rest. And so I would take his phone away where he wouldn't ring so that he could get some rest. Because it seemed like they always called when he was trying to get a nap.
Next message. Hey, this is Portia. I'm starting to get a complex here because you guys have never not picked up your phone.
Our pathologist, Dr. Kurtzman, indicated there was evidence of advanced heart disease. So if he was not feeling well, it was probably attributable to the heart disease.
Prosecutors say that you fraudulently had written about $40,000 in checks on Alan's money that he was about to find out, and that's why you killed him.
He could look up online anytime and see what was coming out of his bank account. Nobody stopped him from doing that. So anything that was written with his approval.
Did you steal any money from Alan?
No, I didn't take anything from him because everything that was put in the bank went into his bank account. None of it came to me.
Did you have anything to do with starting that car fire?
No, I didn't have any inclination to do it. But I almost believe that he started his own car fire.
You mean to tell me that Alan started the car fire himself? Why would he try to do that and possibly hurt himself?
Well, I don't think he thought about hurting himself. And it took me a while to wrap my head around that he would possibly do anything like that.
Miriam says Alan may have tried to set the car fire for the insurance money.
I started to wonder if he did, because as soon as he got his car home, he applied for the insurance on it.
It's a claim that's hard to back up, but Alan was adamant with authorities that he did not believe Miriam would ever try to kill him.
I had called Alan to advise him that I felt his current wife, Miriam, was trying to kill him. And Alan got upset with me and told me that Miriam would never do that to him. And at that point, he asked me to terminate the case.
What about the gun that was missing from your home and Alan's home?
I didn't know it was missing until this whole thing, so I have no idea how or where it went.
It had an unusual family history, that gun.
I know when I first met him, 2 years before that, I saw it when we were moving, and I asked him to put it away because I don't like handguns. I just don't. I already had to deal with that kind of thing. It was very unnerving to me. That was the last time I saw it.
Now, authorities also questioned your alibi, all the receipts that you had. It looked like you were trying so hard to create an alibi. Were you?
It's not uncommon for anybody to pocket their receipts. I had cash and receipts, so they went in my pocket. Done that all my life.
It makes sense to us that she shot him before she ran the errands. Then she runs all the errands, and she creates an alibi for herself on purpose. intending to throw people off.
Miriam, did you kill your husband, Alan?
I did not.
Do you think you'll get out of prison someday?
I do, eventually, because I know that I'm going to keep digging, and I know that we're going to be able to put this together.
What do you think will prove your innocence now?
The fact that I had no GSR on me, I had no blood spray on me.
Wouldn't the blood spatter and the gunshot residue be easily washed off if you took a shower?
Well, you know, that's funny because when I went to the police station that afternoon, you could tell I hadn't taken a shower. There was even some dirt under my fingernails, pretty much from doing the barn that morning and helping him shovel out stalls.
So you had not washed anything off?
No, I hadn't changed clothes, nothing.
Miriam has filed numerous appeals with the courts. They've all been rejected, but she vows to keep on fighting.
It won't be over for anybody till it's over for me, and I do have hope. I know that I didn't kill him. Now that I'm on this path, I'm not going to lay down and die with it. I'm sorry, it's just not in my nature to do that.
How often do you think about him?
I think about him all the time. He was funny. He would say things that I remember. His biggest thing was, it's only business. Treat it that way. You know, he was fun to be around.
After the trial, did you see your mom again?
I did not. I have not seen her since the trial.
After so long, what did Miriam finally have to say to her son?
Don't forget, you're going to put on your jacket, too. We're not used to the 30-degree weather that's awaiting us.
No, we're from Florida.
Maybe different.
This past November, Chris Giles and his wife Kelly flew to Colorado for a much-anticipated visit to see his mom, Miriam, in prison.
So she's in the Dimmins Women's Correctional Facility. So it'll be the first time in probably about 15 years that I've seen her. I have not seen her since the trial.
Why not?
I think, for one, I didn't want to have to just see her that way. See her kind of broken and see her in that situation. I was also kind of mad. I was mad that all this had kind of happened.
Over the years, one by one, Chris lost his entire family to different forms of tragedy.
It's just kind of a whirlwind, and then all of a sudden this happens.
That new husband dies, and then she's arrested.
Yeah. You're trying to figure out how to deal with those things, and you kind of got to deal with the pain, you got to deal with the hurt. Let's rock and roll. It's probably nervous like me, you know, a little bit nervous, a little excited.
Our cameras were not allowed inside the prison, but Chris tells me that reuniting with his mom, while complicated, was also healing for him.
First thing she did was apologize.
What did she say?
As soon as we sat down. She said, "I'm sorry for everything I put you through." She said, "I'm sorry that we had to go through this." But still, once we got to the Alan part, she was firm in that she was innocent of all that stuff. And so we just hashed out kind of what had happened.
Do you believe your mother had anything to do with Alan's murder?
I do not.
With your father?
I do not, no.
Seeing your mom was a big step for you after all these years.
Forgiveness is a big thing, you know. It's huge when you can work through that and go, I don't have to forget about it, but I can choose to forgive you for it.
But when it comes to Alan's family and friends, there are some things that they say they would rather forget.
I try not to think about the murder. I more like to think about the fun times that we had with Alan. That's those are good memories.
What do you think
Alan would have wanted people to remember about him.
He was a lot of fun. He's the kind of guy you could, meet and have a drink with and have a good laugh.
He treated everybody with fairness and respect and gave a lot of love to those around him. Nobody wanted to hurt him except for his own wife. She ended up taking this man's life.
A good man was killed. I don't know whether justice is served or not. She's in jail, and apparently she's never going to get out, but he's still dead. You can't bring him back.
I think his legacy is that he was tried and true in the community. He did what he said he was going to do. Alan was truly loved by everyone that knew him.
Miriam Helmick was sentenced to life plus 78 years.
David, she has exhausted her appeals, but she says she still plans to fight for her freedom. That's our program for tonight. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Deborah Roberts.
And I'm David Muir. From all of us here at 2020 and ABC News, good night.
On Sunday, July the 14th, 2019, at around 7:20 a.m., Oneida County Dispatch in Utica, New York, received several alarming calls from 21-year-old Brandon Clark.
There had been a 911 call saying he had killed a woman and that he was preparing to kill himself.
The victim is Bianca Michelle Devins. There's going to be there's a murder-suicide.
He wasn't ready to let go, and the only way he could rectify the situation is if I'm not going to be with her, then she's not going to be with anybody else.
After the murder takes place, Brandon posts images of Bianca's corpse on Discord and Snapchat, where they quickly go viral.
I have never had a case where I have watched someone be so brutally, painfully murdered, and it felt like I was sitting right there.
I'm living every parent's worst nightmare. You know, just something you would never want to imagine happening to your child. And then to add to that, the pictures of what happened to her are constantly being shared on social media companies. And it's traumatizing every time you see that picture of my daughter.
Her family and friends are urgently battling to have these images taken down.
There were lots and lots of trolls online that would send pictures of Bianca's corpse and would defile them by people that were using Bianca's death as entertainment.
I don't want Bianca to be seen as a gruesome picture. You can lay around, never get out of bed, or you can do something to change. And I know that she would want me to do something.
Following his 911 call, police now need to locate Brandon Clark and discover what has really happened to Bianca Devins. The clock is ticking. On Sunday, July the 14th, 2019, at around 7:20 a.m. in Utica, New York, Oneida County Dispatch received multiple calls from a man who claims he had killed a woman and was threatening to harm himself.
My name is Brandon. The victim is Bianca Michelle Devins.
The man who called 911 portrayed it as a murder-suicide in progress.
The man is 21-year-old Brandon Clark from Bridgeport, Cicero, New York. The woman is 17-year-old Bianca Devins from South Utica. A few hours earlier, images were posted online depicting Bianca's dead body.
Discord is an online platform, and people who had seen the images from all over began to contact police with the information that he'd killed Bianca. He posted a caption that said, sorry, you're going to have to find someone else to orbit.
We're also seeing other posts. He's put a quote from Fight Club from the main character there, Tyler Durden, something like, "It's your life, you're living it one day at a time." There was the picture that he had posted of what looked like a highway saying, "Here comes hell," something about redemption. And then we were able to see some of the Snapchat photographs that he had taken, which included, he had a picture of his bloody hand. He had also done a post that said "ashes to ashes." And on Facebook, I believe he posted something to the effect of, "Sorry to anybody who ever had faith in me, I've let you down." Police were also able to get her local address. So at that time, police were dispatched to the area of Post Street where the crime occurred, as well as to her home address in an effort to see if she was there. You know, maybe this was all a hoax and, you know, the photograph wasn't real.
Copy 4729.
Oh, what's the name again?
That can't be good. Bianca Michelle Devins.
Olivia answered the door, and she came upstairs and woke me up and said, "Mom, the police are here for something about Bianca."
Is your name Bianca? Can I come in? Okay. Is there a Bianca Devins that lives here?
Yeah, why? It's my sister.
Okay, is she here? No. She's not? Do you know where she is?
The first officers came and, you know, asked me if my daughter was Bianca Devins, asked if I knew who Brandon Clark was. He said that Brandon had posted some things on the internet that made them think he may have hurt her.
Can you try to get a hold of your daughter?
Yeah.
Brandon Clark?
Yeah.
Is that her ex or boyfriend? Or apparently he's suicidal. He's made statements saying that he hurt your daughter.
I met Brandon several times. He seemed very nice. He was very open, very talkative whenever he came over. Bianca always kind of was like a little bit different. She just kind of danced to the beat of her own drum. She was into anime and she loved art. She loved reading. My favorite memories are we had like our own version of carpool karaoke, and she always was in charge of the music when we drove, and she would play anything from like 80s all the way up to current music and sing at the top of her lungs. Bianca did talk to me about Brandon often. He wanted more from her than she did. He wanted a relationship and she didn't. She, you know, was looking forward to going off to college and working on some sort of psychology degree. Wasn't really looking for anything serious with him and just wanted to be friends.
It is revealed Bianca and Brandon travelled to New York to attend a concert and to meet a friend, but never returned home early that morning.
Your other daughter's saying that she was in New York?
Yeah, they went to a concert.
All right. Did not with him, though?
Yeah, with him.
With him?
Yeah.
Okay. He was making statements. Now he keeps calling that he's suicidal and that he did something to his daughter. We don't know what extent. We're trying to make sure. We're trying to check on her welfare and also find him. We can't find either right now. They got a location maybe over by Proctor Park right now, but I don't know. That's all the information I have right now. So were they supposed to come back last night? Was she supposed to come home, or she was staying with him?
No, she was supposed to come home.
She was supposed to come home. Okay.
I think I immediately went into shock because it didn't make sense that Brandon would hurt her. Again, we trusted him and he never showed himself to be a dangerous person. Just right away, I just felt like it was very confusing. It didn't make sense. But I was just kind of in the mindset of like, we have to find Bianca.
The 911 call originates from a location on Post Street, but officer response is delayed due to the disruptions caused by the annual Boilermaker race.
Culver Ave is a major intersection that traverses the east side of Utica, New York. As you proceed westerly on Culver Ave, you come to a dead end called Post Street. Post Street's a very residential, quiet area. It ultimately dead ends into a park system and kind of has a little alcove into the trees at the end of the street where the crime scene was located.
There was some confusion by the police of what this incident was. There was reports of, everybody's concerned with terrorism, or there was some kind of something that was going to happen in the race. And ultimately, Officer Zaza from the Utica Police Department was able to make his way to the scene and ultimately located Brandon, who was on the ground, and his phone was blasting through a Bluetooth speaker a song.
The song is actually called Test Drive by Joji, and if you look up the lyrics, it is about a relationship where one of the partners is more invested in the relationship than the other one.
Hi. What are you doing, man?
So he was laying in like a T-fashion. His head was located on the green tarp, and he had a knife in his hand and began interaction with Officer Rocco Zaza.
Officer Zaza begins by making an inquiry saying, where is she? Where's the girl?
Where's the girl?
I don't got a knife, you
Where's the girl?
Where do you think?
Where is she?
Right here, you dumbass.
And he kind of makes this motion, and it's towards the tarp. It's at that point that Officer Zaza can kind of recognize that she's underneath it.
93, we got a scene over here, I think. The female's under some sort of tarp, I'm not sure. Send some units here.
He's got his phone held up, taking what we would call selfies at this point.
4:15 at this time. We need some medics and some units here. Stay down! Stay down! Stay the man. Stay down, Brandon. Come on, man, it ain't worth it. The end of Post Street.
Officer Zaza quickly calls for backup, and additional officers arrive at the scene shortly thereafter.
Brandon appeared to be on the verge of carrying out his threats of suicide. He began stabbing himself with a knife in front of police officers.
Put the knife down!
What the f down, man?
They attempted to take him into custody by handcuffing him, placing his hands behind his back. But due to the injury, strangely enough, Brandon was quite able to continue fighting with the officers. So a very brief but strong struggle ensued, in which the officers ultimately had to kick the knife from his hand and take Brandon Clark into custody by throwing him on the ground and handcuffing him.
He was wounded very, very badly, to the point where police advised me that he was not expected to survive.
July the 14th, 2019. The annual Boilermaker Road Race is underway in Utica, upstate New York, when police receive a 911 call alerting them to a potential murder-suicide on Post Street nearby. 21-year-old Brandon Clark has confessed to killing 17-year-old Bianca Devins.
The scene was hectic enough, but considering that we had a road race going on, at some point we had to pause the road race so that our membership and our crime scene investigators could get in with their van and their equipment. So once we paused the race, we allowed those to traverse the road into the crime scene on Post Street, restarted the race where we had about 10 to 15,000 people running by a crime scene, many of which had no idea what was going on. So at that point, the majority of the runners ran through. We then again secured the crime scene, secured the road, and the crime scene processing began.
The first thing they do is they photograph the scene, which would include photographs from a distance, photographs from mid-range, and then close-up photographs of the evidence. His cell phone had been secured at the scene, and we were going to be making an application to perform a forensic analysis on his cell phone.
He had spray painted, which we did locate spray paint, of a message, "May you forget me not," and a depiction of the Big Dipper, which Bianca had a liking for those types of things. We collected 2 knives at the scene, We believe that he had one knife that he killed Bianca with, the other knife he was probably using on himself, a length of rope. We don't know what the purpose of that was, but given the fact that he tried to commit suicide, we thought maybe he had thought of hanging himself as a way to do that and maybe just couldn't figure it out. A black Chevy SUV was the vehicle that Mr. Clark, he didn't own it, but it was his vehicle for all intents and purposes. Mr. Clark had started a fire and threw a laptop, some paperwork, and a lot of other things that ultimately we couldn't even decipher because they had burned. Probably the biggest piece of evidence is Bianca's body.
So they removed the tarp, they photographed Bianca's body, the medical examiner would arrive, they took custody of the body, and they simply would put it in a bag where they put an evidence tag on it, and then they take it to the Onondaga County Medical Examiner's office for autopsy.
The autopsy concludes that Bianca Michelle Devins' cause of death is sharp force injuries to the neck.
So within an hour, they had told me they had found Brandon and a deceased young woman. They asked me what Bianca was wearing that day, and when they confirmed that she had on a black tank top, black and white Vans, and a black velvet purse, I didn't want to accept it, but I knew. Again, it didn't make sense because there was no signs that he would do this.
Bianca's family also need to come to terms not only with her murder, but with the disturbing images of her death that Clark has posted online.
My friends and family protected me from it until one night I was just scrolling on my phone and I got an Instagram notification that someone had tagged me in a picture and their profile picture was Bianca's death photo. It's traumatizing every time you see that picture of my daughter, and I feel like I failed her because I was supposed to keep her safe and I couldn't keep her safe. And then on top of that, now I can't keep these pictures from being shared.
Bianca's mom, Kimberly, contacted me and learned about this tragedy that had happened to Bianca. And I just kind of went into this really deep dive, just learning everything I could about Bianca. Bianca was in a whole other stratosphere from Brandon. She was beautiful and, just an enigma. She was like this goth girl. So she was kind of in many ways out of Brandon's league. I don't know if Brandon would have murdered Bianca if he couldn't publish it. This crime was really about the publication of the murder. I have no confidence that Brandon would have been motivated to murder her if he couldn't also publish the evidence. He wanted everybody to know Bianca was his.
I think that he's an evil person and he had evil intentions. It was, if I can't have you, no one can.
55 miles away in Syracuse, detectives conduct a search of Brandon Clark's home.
Once Brandon and Bianca were discovered on Poe Street, again, the investigation really started rolling from there. What we realized is Brandon was not someone that was from the Utica area. Found out that he was from the Syracuse area, which is about an hour west of Utica. Found out where he lived, and the police wanted a search warrant for his home for any evidence that might be there in relation to this incident, this homicide. So a search warrant was signed by a judge for his home in Onondaga County. They went to his house. He was living with his aunt at the time. When they got there, she directed him to his basic room.
We located one item of evidentiary value, which we can describe as sort of a will. It was his last will and testament describing what he wanted done with his personal effects, including some things that he made a list of how he wanted to, what we perceived to be what he wanted to do in order to stage a crime scene, how he wanted things handled post-crime scene and things of that nature, and what he would do during the course of what we now know to be the homicide of Bianca Devins.
At the onset of the police investigation, authorities focus on tracing the timeline of when Brandon Clark first met Bianca Devins.
Brandon Clark had found Bianca through her Instagram account about 2 months before he killed her. It appeared that he was obsessed not just with her fame, but potentially with his own fame, and elevating his profile, piggybacking upon hers. That's how some of her friends saw it. Some thought he was a good family friend, others thought that he was exploiting her.
Social media was a very big part of Bianca's life. You know, she did struggle with mental health issues and depression and anxiety. She had some social anxiety, and she found people that she could relate to on the internet and people that she was comfortable with. She always felt more comfortable talking to people on the internet than in real life.
We know Brandon Clark to be kind of a social outcast. I think he saw something he really loved in Bianca and wanted to hold on to it.
Bianca was a big fan of swings. Right by where this happened, there's a park. It's called Proctor Park. I believe she frequented that park and used the swing set. Very shortly after their interactions, he showed up with a tattoo of a swing or swing set on his leg. He went and did something to his body that, for all intents and purposes, cannot be removed for someone that he's only known a very brief time. So definitely gave us some insight as to what type of person and what thought process he had about the relationship with Bianca.
Even online, he was kind of seen as the weirdo, and he was an outsider. Bianca had a lot of friends, and she was very well liked, but we were never really able to find if he stalked her beforehand. I have a feeling that he did. I have a feeling that he knew Bianca from her social media profiles. I think that he probably followed her and kind of researched her before approaching her, messaging her on Instagram. She never mentioned ever being scared or seeing any red flags, anything about him. I trusted my daughter to go to a concert in Queens with him.
Investigators go and interview Kim, who tells them that Bianca went to Queens, New York to go see a Nicole Dollanganger concert.
I think the whole time I was very apprehensive just because that's my baby and she's only 17, just going to a concert. But I also knew that Bianca had a very strong mind of her own. And no matter what I said, she was going to go anyway. And, you know, I was starting to give her some independence as she was going to be going off to college in the fall. So this was like her first little bit of independence, being able to go somewhere, you know, long distance without me. So I was always just apprehensive just as a mother. But again, I trusted him. I felt that she was going to be safe.
3 tickets were purchased, one for Brandon, one for Bianca, and we ultimately learned one from an individual named Alex, of whom she met at the concert there.
She liked Alex a lot. She'd been talking to Alex for a while, just as friends, but she was excited to meet him.
Detectives track down Alex and interview him.
Alex gives us a couple of important points when it comes to prosecuting this case. He's the last person to see Bianca alive. Law enforcement reached out to him. They went down to see him. He gave a statement. He detailed the evening. Brandon knew that he was going to be attending. Brandon left his home in Syracuse and picked her up here at about 2 p.m. in the afternoon. And then they headed down to the city. And it's roughly from here a 4-hour or so drive. They arrived, they looked for parking, and we have them on venue camera arriving at the location. So they arrive there, they meet with Alex, and then the whole concert is essentially videotaped. It's a very small venue, and it's a small gathering at the Nicole Dollanganger concert. And then they leave the concert and they go to like a bodega in New York City. And Brandon went in to this bodega to get some rolling papers. And as he comes out, according to Alex, Bianca and Alex share a kiss, and apparently Brandon has observed that. Brandon felt strongly about Bianca romantically. Did this cause a snap for Brandon?
On July the 14th, 2019, in Utica, New York, 21-year-old Brandon Clark calls 911, admitting to killing 17-year-old Bianca Devins and sharing photos of her body on Discord. Investigators discover Bianca had attended a concert in NYC with Brandon and an online friend, Alex, and that she had kissed Alex in front of Brandon.
The 3 of them get back in the car and start to smoke marijuana, but Brandon does not partake. So it's just Alex and Bianca, I believe, who are smoking. And according to Alex, they begin to have a conversation. It gets kind of tense between Alex and Brandon about this conversation. And ultimately, Alex, Brandon, and Bianca kind of go their separate ways. Alex heads back to his home, and he is communicating with Bianca as Bianca and Brandon are coming back up here to where Bianca lives. And some of the messages, Bianca tells him, you know, I think he saw us, and I think he's kind of mad.
Bianca's final moments in the car remain a mystery, but investigators uncover something troubling on Brandon's phone that sheds light on her last hours as they examine the crime scene evidence.
We always knew that Brandon Clark was our suspect. What we didn't know was why and how. So the phone that he provided and we located on the scene was a trove of information for us.
Initially, we weren't sure where she had been killed until we found the video. When the video is being played, it's daylight. And we knew from Thruway, or what we call Easy Pass, is that's how you pay for tolls on the road, that they had made it to Herkimer County, which is just a short distance from our county, very early on in the morning, like 3 a.m. So we knew that this couldn't have been in New York City because they were down in New York City in the evening. And as you continue to watch video, you can see a dead-end street. And looking out the back window via the camera view, you could definitively tell that, okay, they are on Post Street. So we know she's alive at some point on Post Street. The next thing you see, again, is Bianca now woken up by Brandon because it appears she was sleeping. She sits up, and even though the third row seat is down, she puts her back up against the second row of seats. Again, still facing out the trunk. They begin talking. At one point, Bianca looks away or looks down, and it's that point that you can see Brandon reach into what looks like a bag, which we ultimately did locate at the scene, is a black bag, and pull out what appears to be a knife out of that bag, which ultimately, as you continue to watch the video and see what happens, there's no doubt that what he was grabbing was a knife. He puts that in a place where now he has easy access to it.
Bianca, kind of in an apathetic fashion, is telling him that she doesn't really care what happens to the relationship, that if he doesn't want to see her anymore, she would go about her business and they could just kind of live their life separately. Brandon, clearly not wanting that to happen, increases the argument during the course of the videoing, and at one point physically strikes her in the face, slapping her very hard, in which kind of it reverberates through the car as well as the speakers on the phone.
It was so loud when he hit her. And that's how hard he hit her, that it made this slapping sound so loud. And it's at that point that he grabs hold of her head and puts the knife through her throat, to the point of her taking her last couple breaths.
The graphic images of Bianca are shared online, quickly going viral and causing significant negative consequences.
The public reaction to Bianca's murder was both sympathetic and horrific and exploitative. There is a community of individuals. They call themselves incels. It's a phrase used to describe people who portray themselves as involuntary celibate, primarily young white male who take out their frustrations in acts of misogyny and name-calling, targeting women, oftentimes online. There literally were those who said she deserved it.
We received numerous requests from the family of Bianca to help take those images down off of social media sites. And the larger social media sites, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, things like that, were quite helpful in attempting to remove those sites via their algorithms. However, we ran into some very big trouble with internet sites who stated to us that they exist for salacious content, and short of a judicial order, they would never remove those items.
Social media companies play an indispensable role in terms of intimate partner violence. They contributed hugely to the viral issue of Bianca's murder pictures, but then they also have done a terrible job with the content moderation, because Kimberly and a bunch of other people in their lives have just been inundated with death scene photos by cruel people online. Social media, it's where and how people express threats to one another, publish intimate images without consent, where they create deepfakes, where they extort and sextort. There's so much manipulation of identity and anonymity. At this point, like, these companies know how to mark images and detect them and flag them. Why are they unable to do that when it comes to, like, murder images? One of the issues that Kimberly had was that Bianca kind of became a viral sensation posthumously. And, you know, she had, you know, a couple thousand, like, followers on Instagram when she was alive. But because she became so notorious in death, she became like an Instagram influencer with like 166,000 followers. And Instagram was not giving Kimberly control back of Bianca's page and profile.
All of her social media accounts were immediately memorialized before I even knew. And they will not give me control back. They did offer to say they would delete the entire account, but I didn't want that. I wanted Bianca's account to be there. You know, it's kind of like a snapshot in time of Bianca's personality. I think it should be a place where friends and family can go to see, you know, the things that she posted, who she was. But unfortunately, there are evil people that go in and use her comments to share the picture or to just write horrible things about her. First, you would think, like, okay, something goes against these community guidelines, it should be easy to get it reported and take it down. I never really understand how difficult that process really is. It never, like, occurred to me how much social media companies are really failing us with their lack of regulation. Now we just have to rely on the in-app reporting, which is most of the time, no matter how many times we report it and our friends report it, we get back messages that the pictures don't violate guidelines.
With a mountain of evidence sealing his fate, Brandon Andrew Clark is taken into custody after recovering from his injuries. On February the 10th, he faces the consequences of his actions, pleading guilty to the charges.
The date of February 10th, when he pled guilty to murder in the second degree, there he was asked a series of questions by the judge as well as by myself about kind of what transpired here.
But ultimately the judge had asked him, you know, you're pleading guilty and taking the maximum sentence. So if you go to trial, there's nothing more I can do to you. Why would you do that? And his indication was that he wanted to spare Bianca's family and his family from going through the trial.
The world went into a pandemic in March, and his sentencing was delayed for quite a period of time because the state prisons here weren't accepting inmates on account of the disease. So he remained here in the Oneida County Jail.
While in Oneida County Jail, authorities find writings in Brandon Clark's cell that shed light on his motives, raising further questions and suggesting a deeper story. On July the 14th, 2019, in Utica, New York, Oneida County Dispatch received a series of chilling calls from 21-year-old Brandon Clark, confessing to the brutal murder of 17-year-old Bianca Devins after a concert in Queens, New York City. As the case unfolded, Clark pleaded guilty, but due to the pandemic, his trial was delayed while awaiting his day in court at Oneida County Jail.
While in prison awaiting trial, he was charged with promoting contraband. He also wrote a letter to one of his friends saying that he was bragging about how it felt to kill. And he explained his jealousy motive, that he couldn't handle the idea of her walking out of his life.
There were writings that if things didn't go his way that night of the concert, that he was going to do this. Any remorse that he has shown is very fake. He will say he's sorry, and then it's more, I'm sorry that this happened to me. You know, I'm sorry that I have to live with this. And it's all, you know, anything, he says he wish he could take it back or he wish he could bring Bianca. It's all just very fake. And then, you know, bookended with it's me, me, me. It's all about just about him.
I think he is the typical domestic abuser. He, to me, is the person who becomes infatuated with a significant other and becomes so infatuated that his mindset is, if you're not going to be with me or I can't have you, then no one else will. And he killed her. And that's the type of person I think he is. I think he's a selfish person who just couldn't deal with rejection.
During his time there, he made a motion to the court that he would like to vacate his plea. And he said that he was pressured into making this plea, that his counsel was ineffective. We responded to that motion, and the court made the determination that they would hold a hearing based on the allegations made by Brandon. Brandon was appointed a new attorney since he was making claims against his old attorney. So he was given new counsel to represent him in his motion to vacate. A.D. Nolan cross-examined Clark, kind of agreed that he had no legal training or real basis in which to make that claim. And after that hearing, the judge, in a written decision, denied Clark's motion to vacate and set a sentencing date. At that sentencing, which was held a couple months ago, Brandon was sentenced to 25 to life per our agreement, that he receives no plea bargain in this case because the crime he committed and the way he committed it deserves no leniency in any regard. The maximum is what he deserves, and that's exactly what he got.
In his closing statements at court, he continued to say not necessarily that he was sorry for his act, but that he wanted to write a book to show what mental health was and how to help people. This wasn't, oh, I'm so sorry for the act I committed and the act I committed against Bianca's family. It was, how can I benefit? How can I profit? How can I be more famous for the act that I committed? It was never about Bianca and always about Brandon.
It's hard for me to ever really think about justice in terms of Bianca's case because there's nothing that's going to bring her back. You know, what he did can't be undone. The way that New York State's laws are written, the highest crime he could be charged with was murder in the second degree. The maximum sentence for that is only 25 years to life. So the thought that he could be out in 25, even 40, 50 years is enraging.
I have never believed Brandon Clark to be remorseful, and I don't believe that for a number of reasons. I can tell you I've learned a lot about him by listening to his jail calls, to the way he communicates with his brother, his father, his grandmother, that I don't believe he's remorseful at all. In fact, he tells his brother that he doesn't really think it's fair that he receive such a harsh sentence of 25 to life because this is the first crime he's committed, and although it was bad, it's not the worst thing that anybody's ever done. And he probably, I believe he uses the word probably, if released, wouldn't hurt someone again.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, unfortunately we have a young, beautiful 17-year-old girl whose life was taken tragically short by an individual who could not handle the fact that he was not going to be reciprocated in the fashion that he wanted. Combined with that, there are multiple layers of this case that you just can't forget. There's certainly the horrific act that he perpetrated. Then there's the fact that he sent the images worldwide for everyone to see.
You tell kids and people in general, if you put something on the internet, it's there forever. I mean, everybody's heard that phrase, so be careful. This family, if you believe that to be true, that if something's on the internet, it can never be not on the internet, they're going to deal with this far longer than any other victim of a murder case would ever deal with. No other victim's family, in my experience, has had to deal with that situation. And I feel for them because they're dealing with a whole new situation than most victims' families have to deal with.
Although the case has been closed, Bianca's family is seeking legal aid to protect her image and preserve her legacy, with the support of Congressman Anthony Brindisi.
Bianca's law came about because we saw the need that social media companies needed to be regulated, and the people that shared these images, they needed to be held accountable as well. And then Marion Boutonchon approached my father and said that she wanted to write a law so that these images would be illegal to share.
Well, I think first and foremost, anyone that comes to my office, I try to listen to them and hear what they are. So the needs were with the Devens family. Once you hear the story and understand the importance of the significance of what needs to be done, your heart aches for a family that has to go through this, but you'd never want to see another family have this issue. I sat with them to look at what the legislation modifications need to be. We drafted and worked back and forth probably 3 or 4 times. That legislation had to pass. So I worked with one of my colleagues that had a similar situation in Staten Island. That's why it's Bianca and Carolyn's Law, because these 2 families face the same horrific situation. So basically it identifies that you cannot post a crime within social media. The challenges that we have is we can only control within the state. My colleague in the Senate said, yes, let's work hard. She had carried the bill for many years. So as we came together to determine how best to do this, we were able to pass the legislation.
It's a great first step. I think that the law, in just being a state law in New York, is very limiting. It's my hope that once we can get Bianca's law passed on a federal level, that it would influence social media company policies. I mean, it would basically force them to adhere to their own policies. People can advocate and help to get Bianca's law attention by reaching out to their local congressional representatives, their state senators, and just let them know we need social media regulation, and there needs to be a law that prevents these companies from allowing graphic images to be uploaded.
The legislation we passed in the state of New York, but again, without federal and worldwide support, obviously they can move from place to place before they're posting. And that's not that it is acceptable. I do not condone it, obviously, but what I'm saying is collaboration is the key. They have a lot more to do, and every day my heart aches for them.
What makes this case unique and why it continues to resonate is it asks us all to consider what we see, what we share, why we share, and what the intent behind that sharing is. Are we doing it to generate a laugh? Are we doing it to generate outrage? Are we doing it to embarrass somebody? It is that viral firestorm that continues to haunt the family.
Bianca, just being so young, having her entire life ahead of her, and just being truly an innocent victim. She was loved by her friends and by her family. The friends and family of Bianca kind of came out in droves. I mean, all around her neighborhood, they've tied pink bows to trees and to telephone poles and to various traffic signs as a reminder that she, was a child who grew up in that neighborhood and that her life was lost far too young. So I would say Bianca will live on in this community, and certainly her memory will.
Bianca's case was one that was really important to me. It still is, and to this law firm. We were there the day of Brandon's sentencing. We visited her grave. We saw her bedroom. I do think the system has let them down. Instagram is not giving Kimberly back control of Bianca's legacy. Actually, none of this should have happened. I mean, Bianca should be alive. She should be in college. She should be out having fun right now.
Bianca was a fighter. She really fought and advocated for herself. And I don't want Bianca to be seen as a gruesome picture. I think it was a vibrant, full of life, young woman, ready, just starting a new chapter in her life, going off to college with the goal of helping people. And I hope that people just remember Bianca for who she was and the strength that she had. And she was a fighter, and she was an advocate, and she was a protector.